My husband kicked me out after his son's lies. 3 weeks later, he asked if I'd reflected. I handed him divorce papers, and his son's entire scheme collapsed. I stood on the front porch of what had been my home for 5 years, suitcase in hand, watching my husband Marcus close the door in my face. His 22-year-old son Tyler stood behind him, arms crossed, a smirk playing at the corners of his mouth that Marcus couldn't see. The look in Tyler's eyes told me everything I needed to know. This betrayal wasn't accidental. It was calculated, deliberate, and he was savoring every second of my humiliation. "I can't believe you'd steal from my son," Marcus had said just minutes earlier, his voice cold in a way I'd never heard before. "After everything we've done for you, get out of my house." My house, too, I'd wanted to scream. The house I'd helped pay the mortgage on, the house where I'd cooked thousands of meals, tended the garden, painted every room. But the words died in my throat as I looked at Marcus's face, seeing nothing but disgust where love used to be. He believed Tyler completely, without question, without even asking for my side of the story. I'm Jennifer, 34 years old, and until that moment, I thought I knew what betrayal felt like. I'd been wrong. Real betrayal isn't just the act itself. It's watching someone you love choose to believe the worst about you without a single moment of doubt. It's seeing 5 years of marriage, of partnership, of building a life together, crumble because of one person's lies. And it's realizing that the truth you know means nothing when someone has already decided you're guilty. What Marcus didn't know, what Tyler couldn't have anticipated, was that I had documentation of everything. Bank statements, security camera footage, text messages. I had proof that would destroy Tyler's entire scheme. But as I stood there on that porch, something shifted inside me. I didn't want to defend myself. I didn't want to beg or plead or show them evidence. I wanted them to sit with their choice. I wanted Marcus to live with the consequences of trusting his manipulative son over his wife. And most importantly, I wanted to see justice done on my terms, not theirs. So I did something that clearly surprised both of them. I smiled. Not a bitter smile, not a sad one, but a genuine smile of someone who just realized they're finally free. I picked up my suitcase, walked down those porch steps with my head held high, got into my car, and drove away. I didn't look back. I didn't cry. I didn't call or text. I simply disappeared from their lives as completely as if I'd never existed. That was 3 weeks ago. 3 weeks that would change everything. The first thing I did after checking into a hotel was call my lawyer. Linda Chen had handled my mother's estate 2 years ago, and I trusted her completely. When I explained the situation, there was a long pause on the other end of the line. "Jennifer," she finally said, "before we proceed with anything, I need to ask, do you have proof that you didn't do what Tyler accused you of?" "I have proof of exactly what Tyler did do," I replied. "Security footage from our home system that Marcus doesn't know I have access to remotely. Bank statements showing every transaction. Text messages between Tyler and his friends discussing his plan. Linda, I have everything." Another pause. "Why didn't you show Marcus this immediately?" That was the question, wasn't it? I'd spent 3 days in that hotel room asking myself the same thing. The answer, when it finally came to me, was simple and devastating. "Because a marriage where I have to prove I'm not a thief isn't a marriage worth saving," I said quietly. If Marcus could believe, even for a moment, that I would steal from Tyler, then he never really knew me at all. And if he knew Tyler well enough, he should have questioned the accusation immediately. Either way, this marriage was built on sand. "All right," Linda said, her voice taking on that crisp, professional tone I remembered. "Then let's talk about what you want to happen next." What I wanted was justice. Not revenge exactly, though I won't pretend that wasn't part of it. But more than that, I wanted the truth to come out in a way that couldn't be ignored, minimized, or explained away. I wanted Marcus and Tyler to face the full weight of what they'd done. Over the next week, Linda and I built an airtight case, not for theft charges against me, those were never real, but documenting everything that had actually happened. She subpoenaed records, organized my evidence, and prepared divorce papers that would make my intentions crystal clear. Meanwhile, I stayed silent. Marcus tried calling twice in the first week. I didn't answer. Tyler, emboldened by his apparent success, posted on social media about toxic people and how good it felt to remove negativity from his life. I screenshot everything. Each post, each comment, each smug declaration of victory was another nail in the coffin of his credibility. My sister Rachel was the only person I'd told what really happened. She wanted to march over to the house immediately and tell Marcus everything. "Let me handle this my way," I told her. "Trust me, the truth will come out, but it needs to come out at the right time, in the right way." "You're too calm about this," Rachel said, studying my face. "It's actually kind of scary." Maybe she was right, but I'd spent enough time being the accommodating one, the peacemaker, the woman who smoothed things over and made everyone comfortable. Where had that gotten me? Thrown out of my own home based on lies I never got a chance to defend against. By the end of week 2, Marcus's calls became more frequent. He left voicemails now, his tone shifting from righteous anger to something that almost sounded like uncertainty. "Jennifer, it's me again. I think we should talk. Just call me back, okay?" I didn't call back. Instead, I focused on rebuilding. I found an apartment, small but nice, in a part of town I'd always loved. I transferred money from our joint account, exactly half, as was my legal right. I changed my phone number and gave the new one only to people I trusted. I started therapy to process not just this betrayal, but the patterns in my life that had led me to accept less than I deserved. And I waited. 3 weeks to the day after Marcus had kicked me out, my new phone rang with an unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. "Jennifer?" Marcus's voice came through, uncertain now. "Is this your new number? Why didn't you tell me you changed it?" I said nothing. "Look," he continued, "I think think maybe I was hasty. Tyler's been acting strange lately, and I've been thinking about everything. Have you had time to reflect on what happened? Maybe we can work through this if you've learned from your mistakes. Have I reflected? Have I learned from my mistakes? The audacity of those words hit me like ice water. He actually believed he was being generous by considering taking me back. He thought 3 weeks of silence meant I'd been out here realizing my wrongdoing, becoming properly ashamed, preparing to come back and beg for forgiveness. Marcus, I said, my voice perfectly calm, I'd love to talk. In fact, I think we should meet. Are you free tomorrow afternoon? The relief in his voice was palpable. Yes, absolutely. Where do you want to meet? The coffee shop on 5th Street, 2 o'clock. And Marcus? Bring Tyler. Tyler? Why would— If you want to have this conversation, you'll bring Tyler. Otherwise, we have nothing to discuss. There was a pause. Then, okay, we'll both be there. After I hung up, I sat for a long moment, staring at my phone. Tomorrow, the truth would finally come out. Tomorrow, Marcus would learn what his blind faith in Tyler had cost him. Tomorrow, Tyler's entire scheme would collapse. I called Linda. It's time, I told her. Tomorrow at 2, 5th Street coffee. I'll be there, she said. Jennifer, are you sure you're ready for this? Was I ready? I thought about the woman who'd stood on that porch 3 weeks ago, suitcase in hand, too shocked to defend herself. I thought about the nights I'd spent in that hotel room, questioning everything I thought I knew about my marriage. I thought about the discovery I'd made while going through our financial records. The discovery that had turned my hurt into cold, hard resolve. I'm ready, I said, more than ready. What I didn't tell Linda, what I hadn't told anyone yet, was what else I'd discovered in those financial records. Tyler's lies about the theft were just the surface. Underneath was something so much worse, a pattern of manipulation and deception that went back years. And tomorrow, all of it would come to light. Tomorrow, Marcus would learn that the son he'd chosen over his wife wasn't just a liar. He was a thief, a manipulator, and the architect of his own destruction. And by the time I was done, there would be no question about who the real victim was and who deserved everything that was coming to them. The next morning, I woke up at 6, my mind already racing through everything that would happen in 8 hours. I'd barely slept, but I felt strangely energized. This wasn't nervousness. This was clarity. I dressed carefully. Nothing too formal, nothing that screamed, I'm about to destroy your world, but professional enough to command respect. Dark jeans, a cream blazer, minimal jewelry. I looked at myself in the mirror and barely recognized the woman staring back. 3 weeks ago, I'd been someone who second-guessed herself, who tried to keep the peace at any cost. The woman in the mirror now had steel in her eyes. Linda called at 9. I've got everything prepared. The documents are printed and organized. Jennifer, I have to ask one more time. Are you absolutely certain you want to do this publicly? We could handle this through formal legal channels. Keep it private. Public is exactly what I want, I said. Tyler thrives in darkness, in private manipulation where there are no witnesses. Marcus made his accusations against me public by throwing me out of our home where the neighbors could see. Turnabout is fair play. All right, I'll meet you there at 1:30. We'll go over everything one final time. After we hung up, I spent the next few hours reviewing my own copies of the evidence. The security footage was damning. Our home system had cameras at every entrance, in the living room, kitchen, and hallway. Marcus knew about them. We'd installed them together for security. What he didn't know was that I'd set up the cloud access on my personal account, not our shared one, which meant I still had access to all the footage even after he'd kicked me out. The video I'd reviewed dozens of times now showed Tyler, clear as day, going through my personal items in our bedroom 3 days before the accusation. He'd taken my grandmother's antique bracelet, the one worth nearly $10,000, and several other pieces of jewelry. But that wasn't even the worst part. The worst part was what came next. Tyler, in his own room, using his phone to photograph the items, then carefully placing them in a storage unit rental agreement I'd discovered was in my name, signed with a forged signature. He'd created an entire paper trail, making it look like I'd stolen from him and hidden the items in a storage unit. The only problem with his plan was that he'd been sloppy. The signature didn't quite match mine. The storage unit company had security footage of him, not me, accessing the unit. And most critically, he'd texted his friend Brandon about the whole scheme. Phase 1 complete, the text read. Got the stuff planted in the storage unit under her name. Dad's going to lose it when I discover she's been stealing from me. She'll be out of the house by tomorrow. Brandon's response, dude, that's cold. Your dad really doesn't know what she's like? Tyler, my dad's an idiot when it comes to her. He thinks she's perfect. Time he saw the truth. Plus, once she's gone, I can finally convince him to sell this house and move somewhere better. This neighborhood is dead. With her half of the equity gone, we'll have plenty for a fresh start. There it was, the real motive. Tyler wanted me gone so he could manipulate Marcus into selling our home. The home I'd put my inheritance from my mother into as a down payment. The home that had equity of nearly $400,000. Tyler saw that equity as his ticket to a better life, and I was in the way. But Tyler had made a critical error. He'd assumed I was weak. He'd assumed I'd crumble under accusation, that I'd leave quietly and never fight back. He'd underestimated me completely. At 1 o'clock, I left my apartment and drove to 5th Street Coffee. It was a place Marcus and I used to come to regularly, neutral territory, public enough that there would be witnesses, but quiet enough for conversation. I arrived 15 minutes early and claimed a table in the back corner, positioned so I could see the entrance. Linda arrived at 1:30 exactly, carrying a leather portfolio. She sat down across from me and slid a folder across the table. Everything's in here. The divorce papers are on top. Beneath that, copies of all the evidence, security footage, stills, bank statements, the text messages, the storage unit records, everything. I've also included the police report. I looked up sharply. Police report? Linda's expression was grim. I took the liberty of filing a report yesterday about the actual theft. The theft Tyler committed against you. The detective I spoke with was very interested in the evidence, particularly the premeditation shown in the text messages. Jennifer, this isn't just civil fraud. This is criminal fraud, identity theft, and grand larceny. Tyler could face serious charges. My hands trembled slightly as I opened the folder. There, on top of the divorce papers, was a police case number and a detective's contact information. I haven't pressed charges yet, Linda continued. That's your decision. But the report is filed, the evidence is logged, and if you choose to pursue this, the detective is ready to move forward. I wanted you to have that option before the meeting. I stared at the papers, my mind racing. Criminal charges. Tyler could go to jail. Part of me recoiled from that idea, not out of sympathy for Tyler, but because of what it would do to Marcus. Despite everything, I'd loved him once. Watching his son face criminal prosecution would destroy him. But then I remembered standing on that porch, suitcase in hand, watching Marcus's face fill with disgust. I remembered his words, "Get out of my house." I remembered 3 weeks of silence, of having to rebuild my life alone, of being treated like a criminal for crimes I'd never committed. And I remembered Tyler's smirk. "The option stays open," I said finally. "Let's see how this meeting goes first." At 5 minutes to 2, Marcus walked through the door. He was alone. I felt a flash of anger. He couldn't even follow the one instruction I'd given him, but then Tyler slouched in behind him, hands in his pockets, looking like this was the last place he wanted to be. They spotted me and walked over. Marcus's expression was uncertain, almost hopeful. Tyler's was guarded, suspicious. Neither of them had noticed Linda yet, sitting at a nearby table with her portfolio, appearing to any casual observer as just another customer working on her laptop. "Jennifer," Marcus said as they reached the table. He didn't try to hug me or touch me, which was good because I would have recoiled. "Thank you for agreeing to meet." "Sit down," I said. It wasn't a request. They sat. Tyler sprawled in his chair, projecting bored indifference. Marcus sat forward, eager, nervous. "So," Marcus began, "I've been doing a lot of thinking over the past 3 weeks, and I realized that maybe I reacted too harshly. You've been a good wife, Jennifer. 5 years of marriage, that should count for something. So, if you're willing to apologize for what happened with Tyler's things, and maybe go to some counseling to work on your impulse control issues, I think we could move past this." Impulse control issues. As if I were a child who'd been caught shoplifting, not a grown woman falsely accused of theft. I felt Linda tense at the nearby table, but I kept my expression neutral. "That's very generous of you, Marcus," I said evenly. "And what about you, Tyler? How do you feel about me potentially coming back?" Tyler shrugged. "Whatever, I guess. As long as my stuff stays safe." "Your stuff," I repeated. "You mean like your laptop, your clothes, your car that Marcus pays for?" "Yeah, and my other things. The stuff you took." "Interesting," I said. I pulled out my phone and opened the folder where I'd saved the security footage. "Marcus, before we go any further, I need to ask you something. Do you remember our home security system?" Marcus frowned, confused by the change in subject. "Of course. Why? Do you remember that I set up the cloud access?" His frown deepened. "I suppose so. What does that have to do with anything?" "It means I still have access to all the footage, even after you kicked me out." I turned my phone so they both could see the screen. "This is from 3 weeks ago, 2 days before Tyler accused me of stealing from him." I pressed play. On the screen, clear as day, Tyler entered the master bedroom. He looked around, checking to make sure he was alone, then went straight to my jewelry box on the dresser. He opened it, removed several items, my grandmother's bracelet, my pearl earrings, a gold necklace, and slipped them into his pockets. Then he closed the box and left the room. The color drained from Marcus's face. Tyler's expression went from bored to panicked in an instant. That's not," Tyler stammered. "That doesn't show what you think it shows." "Really?" I swiped to the next video. "Because this is from later that same day. The storage facility on Maple Street. That's you, isn't it, Tyler? Going into Unit 214, the unit that was rented in my name with my forged signature." Tyler's mouth opened and closed like a fish. Marcus stared at the screen, then at his son, then back at the screen. "Marcus," I said quietly, "Tyler didn't just accuse me of stealing. He created an elaborate scheme to frame me. He stole my jewelry, rented a storage unit with a forged signature, planted the items there, and then discovered the theft so you'd throw me out. Would you like to see the text messages where he bragged about it to his friend?" "No," Marcus whispered. "No, this can't be right. Tyler, tell her this isn't true." Tyler's panic morphed into defensive anger. "So what if I did? You were never going to leave her otherwise, Dad. She had you wrapped around her finger. I did this for us, for our future." The words hung in the air like poison. Marcus looked like he'd been struck. "Our future?" Marcus said slowly. "Tyler, what are you talking about?" This was the moment I'd been building to. I pulled out the folder Linda had given me and slid it across the table. "While I was reviewing our financial records for the divorce, I found some interesting transactions," I said. "Tyler, do you want to tell your father about the $50,000 you've withdrawn from his retirement account over the past 18 months? Or should I?" Tyler went white. Marcus grabbed the folder and flipped it open. I watched his hands shake as he scanned the bank statements, each one highlighting transfers from his retirement account to Tyler's personal checking account. "You told me you needed help with student loans," Marcus said, his voice barely audible. "You said it was an emergency. You said you'd pay me back." "I needed that money," Tyler said, but his defiance was cracking. "And you would have given it to me eventually anyway." "I gave you $20,000 for student loans 2 years ago," Marcus said, his voice rising. "$20,000, Tyler. And you told me you'd paid them off. You told me you were debt-free. The loans were always a lie, Marcus, I said quietly. Tyler dropped out of college after one semester. He never had student loans. He's been using your money to fund his lifestyle while telling you he was pursuing a degree. The school confirmed it when I called them. Marcus's face went from pale to red. You dropped out? You've been lying to me for 4 years? Dad, just listen. No, Marcus said, standing up so suddenly his chair scraped against the floor. Several people turned to look. No, you listen. You stole from Jennifer. You framed her for theft. You've been stealing from me for years. And you manipulated me into throwing out my wife, a woman who has been nothing but good to this family. So you could what? So you could have the house to yourself? So you could steal more money? It wasn't like that, Tyler said. But he was standing now too, backed into a corner literally and figuratively. She was in the way, Dad. Can't you see that? She changed you. Before her, we were fine. We had plans. We were going to travel after I graduated, remember? But then she came along and suddenly everything was about her, about the house, about building this perfect little life. I just wanted my dad back. For a moment, just a moment, I saw something flicker in Marcus's expression. Understanding, maybe. Tyler was manipulative, yes, but he was also lost, damaged in ways that came from more than just greed. His mother had left when he was 8, and Marcus had tried to be both parents. Maybe Tyler genuinely felt replaced when I came into their lives. Maybe this wasn't just about money. But then Marcus's expression hardened again. So, you destroyed my marriage. You committed fraud. You stole from both of us. That was your solution? Tyler had no answer for that. I reached into the folder and pulled out the top document, sliding it across to Marcus. These are divorce papers. I'm filing on grounds of abandonment and emotional cruelty. I want nothing from you except what's legally mine, which includes half the equity in the house and half of our joint savings. Linda has already calculated everything. It's all spelled out in the documents. Marcus picked up the papers with trembling hands. As he read, his face crumpled. Jennifer, please. I made a terrible mistake. Let me fix this. We can get Tyler help, therapy, whatever he needs, but please don't do this. Please don't throw away 5 years of marriage. I'm not the one who threw it away, I said. You did that when you chose to believe the worst about me without a single question. You did that when you threw me out of our home without even asking for my side of the story. And you did that every day for 3 weeks while I waited to see if you'd come to your senses on your own. I'm coming to my senses now, Marcus said desperately. I see what Tyler did. I see how wrong I was. We can fix this, Jennifer. We can go to counseling. I'll make it right. I stood up. Linda rose from her nearby table and walked over, placing the portfolio on our table. Marcus, I said, I'd like you to meet Linda Chen, my attorney. Linda, this is my husband Marcus and his son Tyler. Linda nodded professionally. Mr. Hayes, Tyler, I think Jennifer has made her position clear. The divorce papers include a proposed settlement that's more than fair. But there's one more thing you should know. She pulled out a document from her portfolio. This is a police report filed yesterday, documenting Tyler's theft of Jennifer's jewelry, his fraud in forging her signature for the storage unit rental, and his manipulation and slander. The detective assigned to the case has reviewed all the evidence and is prepared to press charges. Tyler's eyes went wide. Charges? You can't, Dad? Tell her she can't do this. Marcus looked at me, his face a mask of devastation. Jennifer, please. He's my son. Don't do this to him. Don't do this to us. This was the moment I'd been waiting for. The moment when Marcus would have to choose. But I realized something then, looking at his broken expression. He'd already made his choice 3 weeks ago. He'd chosen Tyler over me. Chosen to believe lies over truth. Chosen expediency over justice. Nothing I did now would change that fundamental truth about who he was. The choice isn't mine anymore, Marcus, I said quietly. You made this choice when you kicked me out. Tyler made this choice when he framed me. I'm just making sure the truth comes to light. What happens after that? That's up to the police, the courts, and your conscience. I picked up my bag. Linda gathered her documents. As we turned to leave, Marcus grabbed my arm. Jennifer, wait, just tell me one thing. Did you ever really love me? I looked at his hand on my arm, then up at his face. I saw desperation there and regret, but not understanding. He still didn't get it. He thought this was about revenge, about anger, about punishment. He didn't understand that this was about justice, about truth, about refusing to be made small by lies. I loved who I thought you were, I said, but that man would never have believed I was a thief. That man would have defended me. That man would have questioned accusations instead of accepting them as truth. So yes, I loved someone, but I don't think that someone ever really existed. I gently removed his hand from my arm and walked out of the coffee shop with Linda beside me. Behind us, I heard Tyler start to argue with Marcus, their voices rising. I didn't look back. Outside, the afternoon sun was warm on my face. Linda squeezed my shoulder. That was incredibly brave, she said. How are you feeling? I took a deep breath, considering the question. Free, I finally said. I feel free. What about the criminal charges? Do you want to pursue them? I thought about Tyler, about his panic when he realized the depth of his mistakes. I thought about Marcus, about the way his world had shattered in the space of 15 minutes. And I thought about myself, about what I needed to heal and move forward. Let's give them 48 hours, I said. If Tyler turns himself in, admits what he did, and makes full restitution not just to me but to Marcus for the retirement fund theft, I'll consider not pressing charges. But if he doesn't, if he tries to run or hide or manipulate his way out of this, then we pursue it to the full extent of the law. Linda nodded. I'll draft the terms and have them delivered tonight. And Jennifer, for what it's worth, I think you handled that perfectly. You gave them every chance to do the right thing. What they choose to do with that chance is on them. As I drove back to my apartment, my phone started buzzing with calls and texts. Marcus, Marcus, then Tyler, then Marcus again. I didn't answer any of them. I'd said everything I needed to say. The truth was out, the manipulation exposed, the lies brought to light. Whatever happened next was their choice to make. But for me, the chapter was closed. The marriage was over. And finally, after 3 weeks of careful planning and painful waiting, justice had been served. What I didn't know yet was that the consequences of this meeting would ripple far beyond what any of us expected. Tyler's scheme hadn't just affected me and Marcus, and the truth I'd exposed was about to reveal even more lies, more manipulation, more betrayal than any of us had imagined. 2 days passed in relative quiet. I spent them organizing my new apartment, meeting with Linda to finalize divorce paperwork, and trying to process everything that had happened. My phone continued to buzz with calls and texts from Marcus, each one more desperate than the last, but I didn't respond. I'd meant what I said at the coffee shop. The time for conversation was over. On the evening of the second day, Linda called. "Tyler turned himself in this morning," she said. "He's agreed to make full restitution to you and to Marcus. He's also entered a plea agreement that includes probation, community service, and mandatory therapy. No jail time, but a permanent record." I sat down heavily on my couch. "He actually did it. Marcus made him," Linda said. "According to the detective I spoke with, Marcus brought Tyler to the station himself. Apparently, Marcus gave him an ultimatum: face the consequences voluntarily or be disowned completely. Tyler chose the former. How's Marcus handling all this?" Linda paused. "Not well, from what I understand. He's asking if he can speak with you. Not about reconciliation," she added quickly. "He knows that ship has sailed. He wants to apologize properly. It's your choice whether to accept." I thought about it for a long moment. Part of me wanted nothing more to do with Marcus or Tyler, but another part, the part that had loved Marcus for 5 years, thought maybe closure would help us both move forward. "One meeting," I said finally. "Neutral location. You present. I'll set it up," Linda said. The meeting was scheduled for the following afternoon at Linda's office. When I arrived, Marcus was already there, sitting in the waiting area. He looked like he'd aged 10 years in 3 days. His eyes were hollow, his shoulders slumped. When he saw me, he stood quickly, then seemed unsure what to do with himself. "Jennifer," he said, "thank you for coming." I nodded, but said nothing. We followed Linda into her office and sat across from each other at her conference table. The silence stretched between us, heavy with everything unsaid. "I don't know where to start," Marcus finally said. "I've spent the last 72 hours trying to understand how I got everything so wrong, how I could believe Tyler without question but doubt you without hesitation." "And what did you figure out?" I asked. He looked down at his hands. "That I was scared. When Tyler came to me with his accusation, showing me the storage unit receipt, the photos of your grandmother's bracelet, I had this moment where I thought, what if I never really knew her at all? What if our entire marriage has been a lie? And instead of sitting with that fear, instead of talking to you about it, I just reacted. I took the easy way out. The easy way out was throwing your wife into the street. The easy way out was believing Tyler," Marcus said. "Because if Tyler was telling the truth, then I was the victim. I was the wronged party. I didn't have to question myself or my judgment or the relationship I'd built with my son. I could just be angry and righteous and God, I was such a coward." It was the most honest thing I'd heard Marcus say in years, maybe ever, but it didn't change anything. "You were a coward," I agreed. "But more than that, you didn't know me. After 5 years of marriage, you didn't know me well enough to realize I could never do what Tyler accused me of. That's the part I can't get past, Marcus. Not the initial reaction, but the fact that you could believe it at all." "You're right," he said quietly, "and I'm not asking for forgiveness. I don't deserve it. I just wanted you to know that I understand now what I lost. And I'm sorry, Jennifer. I'm so deeply sorry for all of it." I studied his face, looking for any sign of manipulation or self-pity, but all I saw was genuine remorse. It didn't make me want to save the marriage, but it did give me something I hadn't expected: peace. "I accept your apology," I said, "not because it fixes anything, but because I think you mean it, and because holding on to anger will only hurt me, not you." Marcus nodded, his eyes glistening. "Can I ask what you're going to do now? Where you're going to go?" "Forward," I said simply. "I've got a good job, a new apartment, and for the first time in years, I'm making decisions based on what I want, not what keeps everyone else comfortable. It's terrifying and liberating at the same time." "You were always too good for me," Marcus said with a sad smile. "I just didn't realize it until it was too late." We talked for another 20 minutes, handling the practical details of the divorce with surprising civility. Marcus agreed to all of Linda's proposed terms without argument. He was selling the house and giving me my full half of the equity, plus an additional $50,000 as compensation for what he'd put me through. Tyler would be moving out and finding his own place once his probation terms were set. As we stood to leave, Marcus hesitated. "Jennifer, one last thing. Tyler's not a bad person. He's troubled and he made terrible choices, but underneath all the manipulation, he's scared and broken. His mother leaving messed him up in ways I didn't see until now. I'm not making excuses for what he did, but I wanted you to know that I'm getting him real help. Therapy. Actually therapy. Not just court-mandated sessions." "That's good," I said, and I meant it. Tyler had hurt me badly, but I didn't wish him a lifetime of suffering. I just wanted him far away from me. "I hope it helps him." "Me too," Marcus said. Then quietly, "Take care of yourself, Jennifer. You deserve to be happy." As I walked out of Linda's office building, I felt lighter than I had in months. The marriage was ending, but it was ending honestly. No more lies, no more manipulation, no more pretending. Just truth, however painful, and a path forward. But the peace I felt wouldn't last long, because that evening I received a message that would reveal just how deep Tyler's betrayal had run, and how how many other lives he'd damaged along the way. The message came from an unknown number. "Hi, Jennifer. My name is Sarah Phillips. I'm Tyler's ex-girlfriend. I heard about what happened and I think we need to talk. He did something similar to me 2 years ago, and I never reported it because I was scared. But if you're willing to press charges, I want to add my testimony. He can't keep getting away with this." I stared at the message for a long time. Tyler had done this before, to someone else, and she'd been too scared to come forward. How many other victims were out there? How many other women had Tyler manipulated and betrayed? I called Linda immediately. "We need to talk to this Sarah Phillips," I said. "And Linda, I think we need to withdraw my agreement not to press charges. Tyler didn't just hurt me. This is a pattern. He needs to face real consequences." "Are you sure?" Linda asked. "This will be harder on Marcus. It will be public. There will be a trial." "I'm sure," I said, "because this isn't just about me anymore. It's about making sure Tyler can't do this to anyone else." What I didn't know yet was that Sarah Phillips was just the beginning. Over the next week, 3 more women would come forward with similar stories. Tyler had been running variations of this scam for years, targeting women who got close to his father, creating elaborate schemes to drive them away. I was just the latest in a long line of victims, but I was the first one with the resources and evidence to fight back. The case against Tyler went from a simple theft charge to a pattern of fraud, manipulation, and psychological abuse. The district attorney became involved. The local news picked up the story, and Marcus, faced with the full scope of his son's crimes, had to make an impossible choice: stand by Tyler or stand by the truth. I watched it all unfold from the safety of my new life, feeling simultaneously vindicated and sad. This wasn't the ending I'd wanted when I stood on that porch 3 weeks ago. I'd wanted justice for myself, yes, but I'd never wanted to destroy an entire family. But as Linda reminded me when I expressed these doubts, "You didn't destroy anything, Jennifer. Tyler did. You just refused to let him get away with it. There's a difference." She was right. I knew she was right, but it didn't make watching Marcus's world crumble any easier. Despite everything he'd done, despite his failure to believe me, I'd loved him once, and watching someone you've loved suffer is never easy, even when they've earned that suffering. My sister Rachel called one evening after seeing a news report about the case. "Jen, are you okay?" she asked. "This is getting so big. Are you sure you want to be in the middle of all this?" "I'm not in the middle of it anymore," I said. "I'm moving forward. The prosecutors are handling Tyler's case. The divorce is progressing. I'm focused on building my new life. But it must be hard seeing it all over the news." "It is," I admitted. "But Rachel, you should see the messages I'm getting. Women from all over sharing their own stories of manipulation and betrayal, telling me I gave them courage to speak up. That matters more than my temporary discomfort. You're braver than I gave you credit for," Rachel said softly. "I'm proud of you, Jen." After we hung up, I sat on my balcony watching the sunset. My phone buzzed with another message from Sarah Phillips. "Thank you for not backing down. You saved me from carrying this alone." And that's when it finally hit me. The full weight of what I'd done, what I'd set in motion. This wasn't just about my marriage or my betrayal anymore. It was about breaking a cycle of manipulation that had been going on for years. It was about refusing to be silenced or shamed or made to feel guilty for telling the truth. Tyler had counted on my silence. He'd counted on my desire to avoid conflict, to smooth things over, to protect Marcus from pain. He'd underestimated me completely. And now he was facing the consequences not just from me, but from every woman he'd ever hurt. The next few weeks would bring more revelations, more complications, and more difficult choices. But as I sat there watching the sun disappear below the horizon, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Pride. Pride in myself for standing up, for fighting back, for refusing to let betrayal define me. The story wasn't over yet. The divorce still had to be finalized. Tyler's trial was months away, and I still had healing to do. But the hardest part, the part where I had to find my strength and use it, that part was done. I'd handed Marcus those divorce papers. I'd exposed Tyler's scheme. I'd spoken my truth and stood by it even when it would have been easier to back down. And in doing so, I'd discovered something invaluable, my own worth. Not as Marcus's wife or Tyler's victim, but as Jennifer, a woman who deserved respect, honesty, and love. A woman who wouldn't settle for less ever again. The sun set completely, leaving me in darkness. But I wasn't afraid of the dark anymore. I'd been through it and come out the other side, stronger and more certain of who I was than I'd ever been before. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but tonight I was finally at peace. The trial date was set for 8 weeks out. In the meantime, life took on a strange new rhythm. I threw myself into work at the medical supply company where I'd been a sales manager for 6 years, grateful for the distraction and the normalcy of deadlines and client meetings. My colleagues knew about the divorce, everyone did after the news coverage, but they were respectful enough not to pry. What surprised me most was how quickly I adapted to living alone. For 5 years, I'd shared space with Marcus, adjusted my schedule around his, made compromises on everything from what to watch on television to where to go on vacation. Now, in my small one-bedroom apartment, I could do exactly as I pleased. It was unsettling at first, then gradually liberating. 4 weeks after the confrontation at the coffee shop, Linda called with unexpected news. "Marcus wants to testify for the prosecution," she said, "against Tyler." I sat down slowly on my couch. "What?" "He contacted the district attorney this morning. He's willing to provide testimony about Tyler's history of manipulation, the stolen retirement funds, everything. It would significantly strengthen the case. But that's his son," I said, still trying to process this. "Testifying against Tyler could send him to prison." "I think that's exactly what Marcus wants," Linda said carefully. "He called me yesterday off the record. Jennifer, Jennifer. He's devastated by what he's learned about Tyler. The other women coming forward, the years of manipulation, all of it. He feels like he enabled this by being blind to who Tyler really was. I think testifying is his way of taking responsibility or punishing himself, I said quietly. Maybe both, Linda agreed, but it's his choice to make. I wanted you to know before it becomes public. The DA is going to accept his offer. After we hung up, I sat for a long time thinking about Marcus. Despite everything he'd done, everything he'd failed to do, this took courage. Testifying against your own child, exposing his crimes publicly, knowing it might send him to prison. That was the kind of pain I wouldn't wish on anyone, but it was also the right thing to do. And maybe, finally, Marcus was learning to choose right over easy. That evening, my phone rang with Marcus's number. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity got the better of me. Jennifer, he said when I picked up. His voice was rough, like he'd been crying. I heard Linda told you about the testimony. I wanted to explain. You don't owe me an explanation, Marcus. Maybe not, but I need to give you one anyway. He took a shaky breath. When those other women came forward, when I saw the pattern of what Tyler had been doing, I realized something. I didn't just fail you, Jennifer. I failed every woman Tyler hurt after you because I raised him to think he could get away with this. I protected him from consequences his whole life. His mother left because she couldn't deal with his behavior, and instead of getting him help, I made excuses. I told myself he was just acting out, that he'd grow out of it, that he needed understanding, not discipline. Marcus, let me finish, he said. Please, I need to say this. I stayed silent, letting him continue. Tyler didn't become manipulative overnight. He's been this way since he was a teenager, and every time he did something wrong, I covered for him. When he got caught shoplifting at 16, I paid off the store owner to not press charges. When he got into fights at school, I blamed the other kids. When his girlfriend in high school accused him of stealing from her, I convinced her parents she was mistaken. I spent 22 years teaching my son that he could lie, cheat, steal, and manipulate, and someone would always bail him out. The confession hung heavy between us. I'd suspected some of this, had seen glimpses of Marcus's blind spot when it came to Tyler, but hearing him lay it out so starkly was different. That girlfriend, I said slowly, the one from high school. What was her name? Katie Morrison. Why? Did she ever report what Tyler did? No. I convinced her it would ruin his college chances. I told her family we'd pay them back, which we did, and they dropped it. I closed my eyes. Another victim, another woman silenced. Marcus, you need to tell the DA about her. She deserves to know she wasn't crazy, that other women believed her. I already did, he said quietly. This morning, along with 2 other incidents I'd buried. Jennifer, I'm done protecting Tyler from his own actions. I should have stopped this years ago, and I didn't, but I'm stopping it now. This is going to destroy your relationship with him, I said. You know that, right? My relationship with Tyler has been toxic for years. I just couldn't see it. He paused, but I saw it clearly when he stood there in that coffee shop and basically admitted he'd been planning to manipulate me into selling the house so he could take your equity. Our home, Jennifer. The home you put your mother's inheritance into. He was planning to steal that from you, and he was using me to do it. How did you not see who he was before this? Because I didn't want to, Marcus said simply. He was all I had after my ex-wife left, and I was so determined to not fail as a father that I couldn't see I was failing in a completely different way. I wasn't raising a son. I was creating a monster. The pain in his voice was raw and real. Despite everything, I felt a pang of sympathy. What you're doing now, testifying, that takes courage, I said. It doesn't undo the past, but it might prevent future victims. That's all I can hope for at this point, Marcus said. Jennifer, I know I don't have the right to ask, but would you consider being there at the trial? Not for me, but just so Tyler sees that his actions had real consequences for real people, so he can't hide from what he did. I thought about it. The idea of sitting in a courtroom, reliving the trauma of those 3 weeks, was deeply unappealing, but maybe Marcus was right. Maybe Tyler needed to face all of us, all the women he'd hurt, and see that we weren't going away. I'll think about it, I said finally. But Marcus, this doesn't change anything between us. The divorce is still happening. I know, he said, and it should. You deserve so much better than what I gave you. I just wanted to say I'm sorry for all of it, and I hope someday you can build a life where you're truly happy. After we hung up, I sat in the darkness of my apartment, processing everything. Marcus was trying to make amends, but some damage couldn't be repaired. Our marriage was over. That truth was absolute. But maybe, just maybe, something good could come from the wreckage. 2 weeks before the trial, the district attorney's office held a meeting with all of Tyler's victims. There were 6 of us total. Me, Sarah Phillips, Katie Morrison, and 3 other women who'd dated Marcus briefly before I came along. Sitting in that conference room, looking at these women who'd all suffered at Tyler's hands, I felt a strange mixture of anger and solidarity. Sarah spoke first. She was 28, a teacher, with kind eyes that held shadows of old pain. Tyler and I dated for 6 months, she said. When Marcus introduced us, Tyler was charming, funny, supportive, but then things started disappearing from my apartment. Small things at first, jewelry, cash. When I confronted Tyler, he acted horrified and suggested maybe I was misplacing things. Then he found evidence that my roommate was stealing from me, created a whole elaborate frame-up with planted items in her room. It destroyed our friendship. The roommate moved out, and I was so grateful to Tyler for exposing her, except she was innocent. Tyler admitted it to me years later when we ran into each other, said it was just a joke that went too far. Katie Morrison went next. At 32, she'd been Tyler's high school girlfriend. I was 17, she said. Tyler was 16. He stole $300 from my purse and then convinced his dad that I was lying about it to get money out of them. Mr. Hayes, Marcus, paid me back, but he also made me feel like I was the problem, like I was trying to scam his son. It messed with my head for years. I thought maybe I had misremembered, maybe I was crazy. One by one, the stories unfolded. Each woman had been manipulated differently, but the pattern was unmistakable. Tyler would identify someone close to his father, someone who might threaten his control and systematically destroy their credibility. He'd done it to potential girlfriends, to me as a wife, and even to a therapist Marcus had briefly been seeing after his divorce. He's been doing this for over a decade, the prosecutor, a sharp woman named Alexandra Chen, said after we'd all shared our stories. And he's gotten away with it because each of you thought you were alone. That's why this case is so important. Together, you're showing a pattern of predatory behavior that can't be explained away as misunderstandings or mistakes. What's he facing? Sarah asked. In terms of charges, multiple counts of fraud, identity theft, grand larceny, and intimidation of witnesses. Alexandra said, if convicted on all counts, he's looking at 8 to 12 years in prison. The room fell silent. 12 years. Tyler was 22. He'd be in his mid-30s when he got out, if he got the maximum sentence. Part of me felt sick at the thought. Another part felt a grim satisfaction. Will we all have to testify? Katie asked nervously. Probably not all of you. Alexandra said, we'll likely call Jennifer, Sarah, and Mr. Hayes as our primary witnesses, but your testimonies will be part of the evidence establishing pattern and motive. The jury will hear all of your stories. After the meeting, the 6 of us stood in the parking lot, an impromptu support group born of shared trauma. Sarah suggested we exchange numbers, stay in touch. We did, creating a group chat we named Survivors United with dark humor. I can't believe there are 6 of us, one of the other women, Michelle, said. 6 women he targeted over the years. How did Marcus not see it? He saw what he wanted to see, I said. Tyler's his son. That kind of love makes you blind. Blind is one thing, Katie said bitterly. But Marcus actively helped Tyler cover up what he did to me. That's not blind, that's complicit. She wasn't wrong. But I'd also heard the pain in Marcus's voice when he called, seen the devastation in his face during our last meeting. People were complicated. They could be both complicit and genuinely remorseful. Both failed and trying to atone. Marcus is testifying against Tyler, I told them. The prosecutor told me today. He's going to detail everything he knows about Tyler's history, including the incidents he helped cover up. Katie's expression softened slightly. Really? He's actually going to tell the truth? He says he is. We'll see if he follows through. As I drove home that evening, I thought about the trial, now just 2 weeks away. 6 women, all ready to tell their stories. Marcus, prepared to expose his own failures as a father. And Tyler, who would have to face all of us and hear, in detail, exactly what his manipulation had cost. It wouldn't be easy. Trials never were. But for the first time since this all began, I felt like we might actually get real justice. Not revenge, not punishment for punishment's sake, but actual accountability for years of harm. The truth was coming out. All of it, in the harsh light of a courtroom, where lies couldn't hide and manipulation couldn't twist reality. Tyler had spent years operating in shadows, using his father's love and resources to hurt women with impunity. But the shadows were gone now. And in the light, Tyler's crimes looked exactly like what they were. Calculated, cruel, and inexcusable. The only question remaining was whether the justice system would see it the same way. The trial began on a cold Monday morning in late October. I arrived at the courthouse 45 minutes early, wearing a navy suit that Linda had helped me choose, professional and understated. Sarah Phillips met me at the entrance, and together we walked through security and up to the 3rd floor courtroom. The hallway outside was already crowded. I saw Katie Morrison standing near the windows, her arms wrapped around herself. Michelle and the other women from our group were there too, forming a quiet cluster of solidarity. And then I saw Marcus. He stood apart from everyone, looking older than his 48 years. When our eyes met, he gave me a small nod. I nodded back. Whatever complicated feelings existed between us, today we were on the same side. Tyler arrived 15 minutes before the trial was set to begin, flanked by his defense attorney, a slick-looking man named Robert Chandler, who specialized in getting wealthy clients reduced sentences. Tyler kept his eyes down, refusing to look at any of us. He'd lost weight, I noticed. The cocky confidence that had defined him was gone, replaced by something smaller and more frightened. Good, I thought. He should be frightened. The courtroom was smaller than I'd expected, more intimate. The judge, a woman in her 60s named Sandra Delgado, had a reputation for being fair but tough. Alexandra Chen, our prosecutor, had briefed us extensively on courtroom procedure and what to expect. Still, as I took my seat in the gallery, my hands trembled slightly. All rise, the bailiff called, and Judge Delgado entered. The trial of the state versus Tyler Hayes was officially beginning. The prosecution's opening statement was devastating. Alexandra Chen laid out Tyler's pattern of behavior spanning 10 years, from his teenage girlfriend to me, his father's wife. She described the manipulation, the gaslighting, the careful construction of lies designed to isolate and destroy women who got close to Marcus Hayes. This isn't a story about a troubled young man making mistakes, she said, her voice carrying clearly through the silent courtroom. This is a story about a predator who weaponized his father's love to hurt innocent women, repeatedly and without remorse. The defense will try to paint Tyler Hayes as someone who deserves sympathy, someone who was damaged by his mother's abandonment, but the evidence will show you something different. It will show you a calculating individual who knew exactly what he was doing and did it anyway, again and again, because he believed he'd never face consequences. Robert Chandler's opening statement tried to humanize Tyler. He talked about the 8-year-old boy whose mother left without warning, about a teenager raising himself while his father worked long hours, about a young man desperate for his father's attention, who made poor choices out of fear of abandonment. Tyler Hayes is not the monster the prosecution wants you to believe he is, Chandler said. He's a damaged young man who made mistakes, yes, but mistakes born from trauma, not malice. The prosecution would have you believe there was some grand scheme, some pattern of predatory behavior, but what you'll really see is a series of misunderstandings, of youthful errors in judgment, blown out of proportion by a vindictive ex-stepmother and a father consumed by guilt. I felt Sarah stiffen beside me at the words, vindictive ex-stepmother. I squeezed her hand, keeping my expression neutral. Chandler was doing his job. It didn't make the words hurt less, but I'd expected this. The first witness called was Marcus. I watched him walk to the stand, place his hand on the Bible, and swear to tell the truth. His hands shook visibly. Alexandra began with basic questions establishing Marcus's relationship with Tyler, his marriage to me, the timeline of events. Then she got to the heart of the matter. Mr. Hayes, can you tell the court about the incident involving your son and Katie Morrison? Marcus took a deep breath. Katie was Tyler's girlfriend when he was 16. She came to me one day saying that $300 was missing from her purse, and she believed Tyler had taken it. Tyler denied it completely, said Katie was lying to try to get money from us, and I believed him. I paid Katie back, but I also made it clear I thought she was trying to take advantage of us. What do you believe now? Looking back, I believe Tyler stole that money and manipulated me into blaming Katie. It was the first time he'd done something like that, but it wouldn't be the last. Can you tell the court about other incidents? For the next hour, Marcus detailed a pattern I'd never fully known about. A girlfriend in college who Tyler had framed for academic dishonesty. A therapist Marcus had been seeing who Tyler systematically discredited by hacking her email and sending inappropriate messages to Marcus from her account. 3 different women Marcus had dated after his divorce, all driven away by Tyler's interference. Why did you continue to believe Tyler despite this pattern? Alexandra asked. Marcus's voice cracked. Because he was my son. Because his mother had already abandoned him, and I couldn't bear the thought of being another parent who gave up on him. So I made excuses. I told myself he was acting out, that he needed understanding, not consequences. I enabled him, and in doing so, I allowed him to hurt innocent people, including your wife, Jennifer? Especially Jennifer, Marcus said, and his eyes found mine in the gallery. Jennifer was the best thing that had happened to me in years. She was kind, supportive, hardworking, and Tyler couldn't stand it. He saw her as a threat to his control over me and our resources. So he created an elaborate scheme to frame her for theft, knowing I'd believe him without question because I always had before. Did Tyler ever express remorse for what he did to Jennifer? No. When I confronted him after seeing the security footage, he said, and I quote, "So what if I did? You were never going to leave her otherwise. I did this for us, for our future." A murmur ran through the courtroom. Judge Delgado called for order. The cross-examination was brutal. Chandler hammered Marcus about his failures as a father, about whether his guilt was clouding his judgment now, about whether he was throwing his son under the bus to absolve himself of responsibility. Marcus took it all without flinching. Isn't it true, Mr. Hayes, that you're testifying against your son because your ex-wife threatened to pursue criminal charges against you for aiding and abetting his crimes? No, Marcus said firmly. I'm testifying because it's the truth. Jennifer never threatened me with anything. I'm here because I spent 22 years protecting my son from consequences, and I'm not doing that anymore. When Marcus stepped down, he looked utterly exhausted. As he passed our row, he paused briefly, looking at each of us, all the women Tyler had hurt. Then he continued to his seat on the prosecution's side of the courtroom. I was called next. Walking to the stand felt surreal, like moving through water. The bailiff swore me in, and I sat facing Alexandra, very aware of Tyler's presence at the defense table, though I refused to look at him. Alexandra took me through the entire timeline. My marriage to Marcus, my relationship with Tyler, which had always been cordial, if distant. Then the day Tyler accused me of theft. Can you describe what happened when Mr. Hayes confronted you about the alleged theft? He didn't confront me, I said. He told me. He said Tyler had shown him proof I'd been stealing from him, renting a storage unit in my name to hide the items. He said he couldn't believe I'd betrayed them like that. And then he told me to get out of his house. Did he ask for your explanation? No. Did he ask to see the security footage that would have proven your innocence? No. He didn't ask me anything. He simply believed Tyler without question. What did you do after being forced to leave your home? I described the hotel, the lawyer consultation, the discovery of Tyler's scheme through security footage. Then I detailed the financial records that showed Tyler's theft from Marcus's retirement account. Why didn't you immediately show Mr. Hayes this evidence? Alexandra asked. This was the question I'd been preparing for, the one I needed to answer honestly, even if it made me look vengeful. Because I realized something in that moment, I said. If Marcus could believe I was a thief without even asking my side of the story, then our marriage was already over. I didn't want to save a marriage where I had to prove my innocence. I wanted my husband to know me well enough that such accusations would be obviously false, and since he didn't, there was nothing left to save. So you waited 3 weeks before revealing the truth? I wanted to see if Marcus would come to his senses on his own, if he would question Tyler's story, or ask to talk to me, or show any doubt about the the accusations. He didn't. Instead, he called after 3 weeks asking if I'd reflected on my mistakes. That's when I knew he'd learned nothing, and it was time to show him the truth. Chandler's cross-examination tried to paint me as calculating and vindictive. He suggested I'd orchestrated the dramatic revelation at the coffee shop for maximum humiliation. He implied my evidence might be fabricated or manipulated. Isn't it true, Ms. Garcia, that you were angry at Tyler for years before this incident? That you resented his relationship with his father? No, that's not true. But you didn't like Tyler, did you? I didn't dislike him, I said carefully. Our relationship was cordial but not close. He was an adult when Marcus and I married. I never tried to replace his mother or force a relationship. We coexisted peacefully. Until he accused you of theft. Until he framed me for theft, I corrected. There's a difference. Allegedly framed you. No, I said firmly. The security footage shows him taking my jewelry. The storage company footage shows him accessing the unit rented with my forged signature. The text messages show him admitting to the scheme. This isn't alleged. It's documented fact. Judge Delgado sustained the prosecutor's objection to Chandler's attempt to characterize proven evidence as alleged. Small victories. The trial continued for 3 more days. Sarah Phillips testified about Tyler's manipulation of her relationship. Katie Morrison described being 17 years old and having Marcus Hayes intimidate her into silence. The other women told their stories, each one adding another layer to the pattern. The security footage was played in court. Watching Tyler on that screen, casually stealing my grandmother's bracelet, was harder than I'd expected. The courtroom was silent as the video showed him placing items in his pockets, checking to make sure no one saw, then leaving the bedroom with a satisfied expression. The text messages were read aloud. Tyler's smug declarations of his plan, his confidence that he'd never face consequences, his casual cruelty toward me. With each message, I saw members of the jury flinch. The forensic accountant testified about the $50,000 Tyler had stolen from Marcus's retirement account over 18 months, showing the careful timing of withdrawals to avoid detection. Tyler took the stand in his own defense on the 4th day. Chandler had clearly coached him extensively. Gone was any trace of the arrogant young man I'd known. Instead, Tyler presented himself as lost and broken, a victim of abandonment who'd made terrible choices. I know what I did was wrong, he said, his voice quavering. I stole from Jennifer. I framed her. I manipulated my father. But I was scared. My whole life. Everyone's left me. My mom, my dad's girlfriends, everyone. When Jennifer came along, I saw her as another person who'd eventually leave and hurt my dad. So I tried to push her away first, before she could abandon us. It was a good performance, I had to admit. If I hadn't known the truth, if I hadn't seen his smirk as I stood on that porch with my suitcase, I might have even believed it. But Alexandra's cross-examination shredded his story. She confronted him with each text message, each statement that showed calculation rather than fear. She asked him about the other women, about the decade-long pattern. She asked him about the $50,000. If you were just a scared young man trying to protect your father, why did you steal $50,000 from his retirement account? Tyler had no good answer. His lawyer objected repeatedly, but the damage was done. The closing arguments came on Friday afternoon. Alexandra Chen stood before the jury and summarized the evidence methodically. The pattern of behavior, the documented theft, the manipulation of 6 different women over 10 years, the text messages showing premeditation and awareness that his actions were wrong. Tyler Hayes wants you to believe he's a victim, she said, but the only victims in this courtroom are the women sitting behind me, women whose lives were damaged by his deliberate, calculated schemes. The evidence is overwhelming, the pattern is undeniable, and the defendant's own words condemn him. I'm asking you to hold Tyler Hayes accountable for what he's done, to send a message that this kind of predatory manipulation will not be tolerated. Chandler's closing argument was emotional. He talked about childhood trauma, about the 8-year-old boy whose mother abandoned him, about a justice system that should rehabilitate rather than simply punish. He asked the jury to show mercy to a young man who needed help, not incarceration. Judge Delgado gave the jury their instructions. They filed out to begin deliberations at 3 in the afternoon. We waited. Linda had warned me that jury deliberations could take hours or days, but somehow I hadn't internalized what that meant. The waiting was excruciating. The 6 of us, the survivors, sat together in the hallway. Marcus sat alone on a bench across from us, his head in his hands. 4 hours later, at 7 o'clock, the bailiff announced the jury had reached a verdict. We filed back into the courtroom, my heart pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. Tyler stood as the jury entered, his face pale. Has the jury reached a verdict? Judge Delgado asked. We have, Your Honor, the foreperson, a middle-aged woman with glasses, said. She handed a paper to the bailiff, who passed it to the judge. Judge Delgado read it without expression, then handed it back. The defendant will rise. Tyler stood, his lawyer beside him. I could see him trembling from where I sat. In the matter of the state versus Tyler Hayes, on the count of grand larceny in the 1st degree, how do you find? Guilty, Your Honor. On the count of fraud in the 2nd degree? Guilty. On the count of identity theft in the 2nd degree? Guilty. The verdicts continued, count after count. Guilty. 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 Tyler's shoulders shook. Behind me, I heard Sarah start to cry quietly. I reached back and squeezed her hand. My own eyes burning with tears, I refused to let fall until we were outside. Judge Delgado thanked the jury and scheduled sentencing for 3 weeks later. As the courtroom began to empty, I finally looked at Tyler. He was staring at me, and for the first time since this all began, there was no smirk, no arrogance, just fear and regret. Too late, I thought. Years too too late. Outside the courthouse, reporters waited with cameras and microphones. Alexandra Chen gave a brief statement about justice being served. I declined to comment, as did the other women. We told our stories in the courtroom, where it mattered. We owed the media nothing. Marcus found me as I was about to get into my car. Jennifer, he said, thank you for having the courage to bring this to light, for not letting Tyler get away with it one more time. I didn't do it for you, I said, not unkindly, but honestly. I know, he said, but still, thank you. As I drove back to my apartment, I felt a strange mixture of emotions. Relief, certainly. Vindication. Sadness for what had been lost and could never be recovered. But underneath it all, a quiet strength. I'd stood up for myself. I'd refused to be silenced or shamed. And justice, real justice, had been done. The divorce papers had been finalized 2 weeks earlier. I was no longer Jennifer Hayes. I'd gone back to my maiden name, Garcia. A new name for a new life. One built on truth rather than lies, on self-respect rather than accommodation. 3 weeks later, I returned to the courthouse for Tyler's sentencing. Judge Delgado gave him 8 years in state prison, citing the pattern of behavior and lack of genuine remorse. Tyler was led away in handcuffs, and I walked out of that courthouse for the last time, finally and completely free. 6 months after Tyler's sentencing, I sat in my apartment on a Saturday morning, coffee in hand, watching spring rain streak down the windows. The apartment didn't feel temporary anymore. I'd painted the walls, hung artwork I'd chosen myself, filled the space with plants that thrived under my care. It was small, but it was mine, every inch of it reflecting choices I'd made for myself alone. My phone buzzed with a message in the Survivors United group chat. Sarah had sent a photo of herself at a gallery opening, her artwork on display for the first time. The caption read, "Wouldn't have had the courage without you all." Katie responded with heart emojis. Michelle shared that she'd finally left the job where her boss had been gaslighting her for years, inspired by watching us all stand up for ourselves. These women had become real friends, born from shared trauma but sustained by genuine connection. We met for dinner once a month, celebrating victories and supporting each other through setbacks. The bond we'd formed was something Tyler's manipulation had inadvertently given us, though he'd never understand that. My sister Rachel called as I was finishing my coffee. "Jen, did you see the news?" "What news?" "Marcus's interview. It's all over the local stations. He's talking about parental accountability and enabling. It's actually pretty brave." After we hung up, I found the video online. Marcus sat across from a local reporter, looking tired but clear-eyed. He spoke about his failures as a father, about how protecting Tyler from consequences had ultimately destroyed both their lives. He'd started a support group for parents of adult children who'd committed crimes, focusing on accountability and healing rather than excuses. "I spent 22 years teaching my son that he could hurt people without facing consequences," Marcus said in the interview. "I thought I was being a good father by protecting him, but real parenting means teaching accountability. It means letting your children fail and learn from those failures. I failed at that spectacularly, and multiple women paid the price for my failure." The reporter asked if he'd been in contact with Tyler. Marcus shook his head. "Tyler has made it clear he blames me for testifying against him. He's written me several letters, but they're all variations on the same theme. If I'd just kept covering for him, none of this would have happened. He still doesn't see that his actions were the problem, not my decision to finally tell the truth. Until he can take real responsibility, not just perform remorse, we have nothing to discuss." I closed the video, feeling a complicated mix of emotions. Marcus was trying to do better, to be better. It didn't change the past or fix what had been broken between us, but it mattered. Growth, even late growth, mattered. The divorce settlement had been finalized 4 months ago. My half of the house equity, plus the additional compensation Marcus had insisted on, had given me enough to put a down payment on a small house in a neighborhood I loved. I was closing on it next month, a house that would be entirely mine, no shared memories, no ghosts of betrayal haunting the rooms. Work had become more fulfilling too. After the trial, I'd been promoted to regional sales director, a position that came with better pay and more autonomy. My boss had pulled me aside after the promotion was announced. "You've always been talented, Jennifer, but this past year, you've shown a strength and clarity I hadn't seen before. Whatever you've been through, it's made you better at what you do." She was right. The woman who'd stood on that porch 6 months ago wouldn't have pushed for this promotion, wouldn't have believed she deserved it. But the woman I'd become through fire and truth knew her worth and wasn't afraid to claim it. I'd started dating too, cautiously. Nothing serious yet, but I'd gone on several dates with a man named David who taught high school history and had kind eyes. He knew about the trial, everyone did, but he treated it as part of my past, not the definition of my present. When I told him I wasn't ready for anything serious, he'd simply said, "That's okay, we can take it slow." I'm not going anywhere. The simple honesty of that statement, the lack of pressure or manipulation, had made me tear up. This was what healthy looked like. This was what I deserved, and would accept nothing less than from here forward. Linda Chen called one afternoon with unexpected news. "Jennifer, I got a call from the prison. Tyler's requesting to see you. He says he wants to apologize in person." My first instinct was to refuse immediately, but something made me pause. "What do you think?" I asked Linda. "I think it's your choice," she said carefully. "But if you do go, I'd come with you, and I'd go in with very clear boundaries about what you will and won't discuss." I thought about it for 2 days. Part of me wanted to hear Tyler admit what he'd done, to look him in the eye and hear genuine remorse. But another part knew that whatever Tyler said, it wouldn't change anything. The closure I needed wasn't in his apology. It was in the life I'd built without him or Marcus, in the strength I'd discovered in myself, in the justice that had already been served. Tell him no, I finally told Linda. I don't need his apology. I don't need anything from him. Are you sure? Linda asked. Completely sure. Tyler's story is over for me. I'm focused on my own story now. Spring turned into summer. I closed on my new house, a charming craftsman with a garden that needed work and a front porch perfect for morning coffee. Rachel helped me move, along with Sarah and Katie and the other women from our group. We christened the house with champagne and laughter, filling it with the kind of positive energy it deserved. To new beginnings, Sarah said, raising her glass. To knowing our worth, Katie added. To women who refuse to be silenced, I finished. We drank to all of it, to survival and growth and the messy, beautiful process of healing. One evening, I found myself in my garden, pulling weeds and thinking about everything that had happened. A year ago, I'd been married to Marcus, living in a house that never quite felt like home, accommodating and smoothing over and making myself smaller to keep the peace. That version of me felt like a stranger now. The betrayal had been devastating. The 3 weeks after Marcus kicked me out had been some of the darkest of my life, but I'd walked through that darkness and emerged on the other side not broken, but forged into something stronger. Tyler had tried to destroy me, and instead, he'd freed me. Marcus had tried to call a few times over the past months. I'd answered once, back in April. He'd wanted to tell me he was proud of the life I was building, that he hoped I was happy. The conversation had been brief, but not hostile. We'd both moved on, carrying our scars, but not defined by them. I hope you find someone who deserves you, Marcus had said before we hung up. I hope you learn to be the father you should have been, I'd replied. Not cruel, but honest. That seemed to be the theme of my new life. Honesty, even when it was uncomfortable. Boundaries, even when they disappointed others. Self-respect, even when it meant walking away from people and situations I'd once thought were essential. My phone buzzed with a text from David. Dinner Saturday? There's a new Italian place I think you'd love. I smiled and typed back, Saturday works. Looking forward to it. No games, no manipulation, just two adults making plans. Simple, straightforward, healthy. This was what my life looked like now, and it was good. Not perfect. I still had hard days when the betrayal stung fresh, but fundamentally good in a way it never had been with Marcus. As the sun set over my garden, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink, I thought about Tyler in his prison cell. He was 23 now, serving 8 years for crimes he still seemed to believe were justified. He'd be 31 when he got out, his 20s spent behind bars because he'd underestimated one woman's refusal to be made a victim. I didn't hate him anymore. Hate required too much energy, too much emotional investment. Instead, I felt a distant pity for the boy, whose fear of abandonment had twisted into something cruel, whose father's misguided protection had prevented him from ever learning accountability. But mostly, I didn't think about Tyler at all anymore. He was a chapter in my story, an important one that had changed my trajectory, but not the defining chapter, not the ending. The ending was me, in my garden, in my house, living my life on my terms. It was Sarah's art shows and Katie's engagement to a man who actually deserved her and Michelle's new career, and all of us, together, proving that survival wasn't enough. We were thriving. I went inside and pulled out my laptop. I'd been writing lately, processing everything through words. Not for publication, just for myself, chronicling the journey from that porch to this garden, from devastation to liberation. Maybe someday I'd share it, add my voice to the chorus of women refusing to be silenced. But tonight I just wrote for me, for the woman who'd stood on that porch 6 months ago, for the girl I'd been who thought keeping the peace was more important than demanding respect, for every version of myself who'd compromised and accommodated until there was barely anything left. I wrote, today I am free, not because my betrayers faced justice, though they did, not because my ex-husband finally understood what he'd lost, though perhaps he does. I'm free because I chose myself, because when forced to choose between the comfortable lie and the difficult truth, I chose truth, because when they tried to make me small, I chose to take up space, because when they expected silence, I roared. The words flowed easily now, not tangled with doubt or second-guessing. This was my story, and I was finally, completely the author of it. Later that night, as I got ready for bed in the house that was mine alone, I caught sight of myself in the mirror. The woman staring back was 34 years old, divorced, carrying scars from betrayal, but stronger than she'd ever been. Her eyes were clear, her shoulders square, her expression peaceful. You did good, I told my reflection. You stood up, you fought back, you won, and I had won. Not because Tyler was in prison or Marcus was alone or justice had been served, though all of those things were true. I'd won because I'd refused to let betrayal define me, refused to let manipulation break me, refused to accept anything less than the truth. My phone pinged one last time before I turned it off for the night. A message from the Survivors United group. 1 year since the trial verdict. Can't believe how far we've all come. Love you all. I sent back a heart emoji and a simple truth. Love you too. We did this. All of us together. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities, new chapters. But tonight, in my home, in my life, in my hard-won peace, I was exactly where I needed to be. The revenge I'd wanted, the justice I'd sought, had never been about destroying Tyler or punishing Marcus. It had been about reclaiming myself, standing in my truth, and building a life where betrayal had no power over me. And that life, I realized as I drifted off to sleep, was the sweetest victory of all. What did you think of this story? Have you ever had to stand up for yourself when no one believed you? Share your experience in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to the channel. Your support means everything, and thank you so much for watching until the end. Remember, your truth is always worth fighting for.